Kermit, this next one shows your Sunderland flying out of the UK, and I wanted to use it as a kind of opportunity to have you tell us about the route you took to come back to the United States after purchasing the airplane in the UK.
Yeah, obviously, like I said, the airplane hadn't flown in 2 years when I bought it, and so we did, considerable amount of work on it. I purchased it in February of 1994, and we flew it across in the summertime in time, literally to arrive a minute before our scheduled air show slot at Oshkosh in 1994, which is pretty cool. Of course, we timed it when we departed, but this is a test flight. We did a bunch of test flying, and this is over the Needles, basically, in southern England. And obviously, it was pretty cool to have arranged for a photo mission. And there's some other cool shots, but basically, we were just flying the airplane around. And when we eventually left, the intent was, with 16 hours of range, the intent was, the first stop was to fly to Ireland, okay? And we flew by the old Pan Am base there on Ireland at Foynes, okay? And everybody was out there and waving to us or whatever, so we made a couple of passes. But that was connected to the ocean, okay, and there was no service for fuel or anything. So we landed on a Lough DERG, which was kind of a freshwater loch in Ireland, fueled it, spent the night. The original intent, like I said, was to fly from Lough DERG to somewhere in Canada, okay? And like I said, I'd hit all these spots going over, and I went to St. John's, I went to Gander. I did not go to Goose Bay. But what happened was, 2 weeks prior to us leaving, we're working on the airplane, preparing everything. We'd been watching the winds and everything, and it was like the winds were against us because everything is, coming from the west to the east. So we were going to have headwinds. And I thought, let me fly up to Iceland. So 2 weeks before we left, I flew up to Iceland, and there was somebody that was in aerobatics that somebody knew, and he kind of hosted me there. And so I checked it out, checked out fuel. There was a mooring buoy there. It used to be a Sunderland base in World War II, just south of Reykjavik airport. And so there was a big buoy there, and they arranged for fuel and customs. I said, well, forget that. Let's not worry about, are we going to make it or not? Let's just fly up to Iceland. So the second leg, what we did is we took off out of Ireland, and we flew to Iceland. There was a little bit of weather kind of there, and we kind of came under it, went around the island by Keflavik. There's a big Air Force base there. We flew around, came in, landed fine. We were under the clouds and stuff. And, we landed there, and we spent a couple of days. We had a governor that was leaking, a couple other little things that we fixed. We were kind of watching the weather. I got to go spend some time sitting in the Blue Lagoon, which was a really cool experience, some hot springs west of Reykjavik. So anyway, and we tooled around, basically waiting for the weather to clear over Canada. By this time, I started calling around. I was a little reluctant. I wasn't sure where to land. And I checked out Goose Bay, and they happen to have a seaplane base there. They happen to have a buoy. They happen to have a bar. It was all this. And I go, oh my God, let's just go there. Thank God we did. It was the best thing that ever happened. It was the only place I didn't check out. And basically, it was fascinating because what should have been a pretty long flight, we left Iceland after sitting there for 4 days with a 40-knot tailwind. Oh my God, it was so cool. We never got above 2,500 feet. And all of a sudden, we could kind of see something on the horizon. And the cool part about it is, since we went to Goose Bay, we were a little further north than had we gone to Gander or St. John's. We got to fly right past the southern end of Greenland. And there's all this ice. It was in the middle of the summer, man. We froze our butts off. In fact, we opened the windows on the side to do some video, and we didn't have any heat or anything. And we opened up, the video cameras wouldn't work. It was so cold. This is in July, okay? So anyway, we flew across, and, normally when pilots get out over water, they kind of get a little, tense, okay? Well, let me tell you something. In this flying boat, I'm flown over all these damn icebergs and ice pack. I've never been so happy to be out over open water in my life, you know? So anyway, so it was about a 5-hour flight to the southern end of Greenland, and it was about another 5 hours. It was a 10-hour flight from Iceland to Goose Bay. We landed there. It was a beautiful place. It was man, if I couldn't have picked a better place to land. We landed, pulled in, and eventually, you know, we just pulled the flying boat up. Then that afternoon, filled it up with fuel, stuck it back on, towed it out with our little dinghy. And the next day we took off and headed down the St. Lawrence with the intent to either land at a place around Montreal or Toronto Island Airport, which there's a big, I can't remember what the lake there, it's not Lake Superior, but it's one of those big lakes just by Toronto. There was a massive bunch of thunderstorms, and we kind of got pushed around some weather. And, you know, technically we were supposed to be VFR. I didn't even have an instrument rating at the time. And we were flying over VFR, and I will tell you, we always saw the ground. We never flew through a cloud. And if there was any lightning and black stuff outside the windows, I never saw it. But anyway, we ended up coming into Toronto. The weather was so freaking clear. It was so gorgeous. We were so happy. We landed there, spent the night, and the next day was the opening day of Oshkosh. And of course, EAA had arranged for customs, because you got to remember, every place I landed, I had to get airplane gas. I had to clear customs because it was a different country. And so, you know, we arrived there literally a minute before our scheduled air show slot time on the first day of the flying. And I think we flew every day, and we had rented a houseboat. We had people, I think we charged $5 or $6 or something to go out. And when people were going back and forth, you know, from where the Pioneer Motel was, and we ran out of there. And then we left the airplane there because my seaplane ramp wasn't done. We had a set of beaching gear, a second set we had shipped up to Oshkosh. And after the fly-in, we basically put the beaching gear on. We brought the boat in, and we basically hired a crane. And the British had never seen this, but I knew in the manual there was a way to pick the airplane up. So we had a special hoist made. I had custom made based on what the manual said. And we just pulled the thing up there, hooked it up, picked the crane up, picked the thing out with the beaching gear, stuck it on the ground, rolled it over. I put an 8-foot fence around it. We shrink wrapped off the windows and anything that, you know, would have been a thing. And, you know, there's pictures of it sitting on the land in the snow. It was stayed the whole winter. We put it back in the water in 1985, flew it again at Oshkosh. And by that time, you know, we went ahead and Fantasy Flight was being pretty close to being built. We went ahead and we opened in the winter of 1995, or, you know, 11/11. It was November, Armistice Day. And anyway, so then it sat another year here in the lake, just west of Fantasy Flight, and we finally got it out when the hangar got done. So we opened in the museum. It's been inside pretty much ever since, unless we roll it out for, you know, either special occasions or we got to do something in the hangar or something like that.
Kermit, you might be the last person to take an airplane like this across a major ocean. Was that on your mind while you were operating it?
Not at all. I mean, somebody can always do it again, but at least at this point, it's pretty cool. I was in the left seat flying it across, so that's pretty neat. And also, too, a little bit of follow-up on that. Every place we went to, we pretty much had, you know, in effect, unlimited water for takeoff and landing, okay? We're flying off locks. We're flying off of rivers. We're flying off Lake Winnebago, you know, the Atlantic Ocean. And it's like, there was not a problem. Well, when I brought the airplane down, the lake I've got here only in 2 directions is 6,000 feet long, okay? And I'm going, I don't know if it's going to, I know I can get it in. I don't know if I can get it out. So when we landed here, we had sunk some concrete with a mooring buoy in a lake just south of Fantasy Flight here. So we didn't have access to Fantasy Flight, but it was 12,000 feet long, you know, so it was a couple of miles. And I knew that was not an issue. So when we flew the airplane down from Oshkosh, what I think was 6 hours or something, I can't remember. But anyway, we flew it back, and the airplane cruises about 150 miles an hour. But when we landed here, we landed in a lake to the south. We moored it up there. It sat there for a while. And then eventually I had to figure out, can I land this thing in my lake, okay? Or can I get it out? So what we did was, by that time, you know, we had GPSs and stuff. So I basically had a GPS, and I put some not mooring buoys, but I put some buoys out in the water like every 500 feet. So I had the first one from 500 feet from the shore, then 1,000 feet, 1,500 feet. I just wanted to figure out what it was going to take to get the airplane in and out. And so we did some practice. Surprisingly, this airplane with like quarter flaps down or whatever, the problem was I would get as close as I could to shore, but by the time I got 90 degrees and could put all the power in, I'd already burned up 500 feet of the lake, okay? This thing would break water at 65 knots in 2,500 feet. So I was airborne 3,000 feet from the shore. So I figured I can get in and out of, you know, 6,000 feet. So basically, one day we were out flying around, we were going to bring it in. There was a bit of some wind flying down. I landed it. It was no problem because the lake, the 6,000 foot this way and this way, there's a bit of a dog leg. So once you land, you can actually turn the boat and you have some more things. But remember, this is not like a Grumman Albatross or a Martin Mars, which has got reversible propellers. You're moving forward and you're not stopping. So if you think you're gonna, you know, you got to turn and you got to think ahead in this thing. So anyway, so we moored it here, and you know, eventually, you know, anytime we flew it out of Fantasy Flight, and I flew it out, you know, a number of times. Like when we went down, did the torch relay, you know, we basically would take off with about a quarter fuel, which is 4 hours. So that was plenty. And, you know, we figured it out. It was pretty cool. I enjoyed flying it, and it was a great, great experience. Very fond memories of this airplane and all my experiences with it. This is a shot leaving CALSHOT when we were leaving out of England.
So Kermit, this was shared with a fan of yours on your Twitter feed. Can you talk a little bit about the response people had to what was possibly the last of the airworthy Sunderlands leaving the UK to come to the United States?
Well, I wasn't around to hear any of it. I had left. I didn't have to deal with it. But, you know, I mean, certainly they, you know, and I had a lot of people, the airplane needs to come back to the UK. Well, trust me, everybody over there had the opportunity to buy this. They could have bought it and it was in their backyard. I bought it. I had to bring it to my backyard. I mean, think of all the logistics I had. I personally was going to every spot before we brought this back, 2 weeks before, looking at places we could land, talking to customs, dealing with fuel people, you know. And I mean, it was a big deal. It's not like, oh, hey, let's go jump in it and go. You don't realize, it's not like a Grumman Albatross where, oh, well, the water's kind of choppy, let's go land at this airport and walk out, you know. I mean, it's a flying boat, and it takes a different set of considerations to operate it safely and properly, and I mean, you got to know what the water depths are. You can't just land somewhere and run aground. I mean, look, the Martin Mars ran aground up at Oshkosh. One of the things that I came up with that I thought was pretty freaking ingenious, that I never heard anybody doing in a seaplane, I came up with a deal. I went out and bought a bunch of little 5-pound weights. Okay, I bought a bunch of 5-pound weights or couple pound weights or something like that. And the Sunderland, with the beaching gear, it draws, I think it draws 6 feet. Without the beaching gear, it draws, the tip of the bottom there is 5 feet. It could basically draws 5 feet, okay? And so basically what I did, I went out, I got some weights, I got some of those little flotation lights like you see on a ski course, you know, where they're like vertical and they're made out of foam. I bought a bunch of those and I tied them up in like 6-foot lengths. And the plan is if we got someplace and we didn't know what the water depth was, we'd fly over and chuck a bunch of them out, and we'd fly back and look at them. And if they were vertical, the water was deep enough. And if it was laying over on its side, it wasn't deep enough. Now, how cool and smart is that? I never heard of anybody doing that. I came up with that idea myself. And we used to keep them on the airplane, you know, in case we ever had to land somewhere and we didn't know what the water depth was.
Certainly an ingenious way to solve kind of an unusual problem. Kermit, this next photo is of the airplane up at the seaplane base in Oshkosh. A couple folks have asked us, how did you bring it to Oshkosh? not necessarily everyone knows that there's a really cool part of that experience that is the seaplane base out on Lake Winnebago. Can you talk to us a little bit more about what it's like to land in that lake and to bring this airplane into this community of seaplane and flying boat enthusiasts?
Well, okay, first, a little bit of a correction there. We did not actually go to the seaplane base. The first year we were there in 1994, they put a weight down, a concrete weight, and had this buoy. This is probably 1994 when we were there. When we went back the second time, I can't remember, we didn't have access to the buoy or the weight. They pulled it up, and what we did is we basically, I came up and I had 3 big boat anchors, and we basically put the boat anchors out there in like a big claw kind of a configuration. So, and then we would basically more of the deal there. We got through the fly-in fine, but one day after the fly-in, the wind picked up and the anchors started dragging. 3 big freaking boat anchors, because they weren't digging into, there was no sand. It must be like a rock bottom there or something. And it was headed towards the seaplane base. But the second time we weren't like right in that little bay. I don't know. I can't believe they put the Martin Mars there, because I wasn't going to put my boat there. When we pulled up there in the Martin Mars, that close to the seaplane base, and they didn't find out till later when they scraped the bottom, because I went over there and I checked the water depth. When they scraped the bottom on the Martin Mars and they put it back at the mooring buoy where they had it, and they went under there was like a foot of clearance. It was like not deep enough, and I was like, anyway, so anyway, we were close enough. The first year we operated the pontoon boat out of the Pioneer Hotel, which was not anywhere near the seaplane base. And the second year we operated the pontoon boat out of the seaplane base, but we were still kind of offshore.
Makes sense. Got to prioritize the safe operation of the airplane. Kermit, on your Kermie Cam featuring the Sunderland, you mentioned that one of the most useful things that came along with the airplane was maintenance steps that attach to the leading edge of the wing to allow engine work to be done while the airplane is out over the water.
Yeah, this is, I mean, obviously, think about it. You got to maintain the airplane. If you're sitting in the water, first thing you want to do is probably put some floats on some of your wrenches in case you drop one. But these basically, on both sides of each engine, you unscrew some little latches there. They fold down, and actually, there's other aspects of this which clip onto the front of each of these leading edge pieces that go down to extend that out, and down below you can actually change engines and propellers that way. This is an earlier engine, which is probably the Bristol Pegasus engine. The engine that's on my airplane is a Pratt Whitney 1830, which is what they use on like DC-3s and Catalinas. So, but yes, and then also there was a provision to where, yeah, you can see the extension where that guy's sitting there. They also had crane things that you could actually connect back on the top of the wing behind the main spar or something like that, and hook this up and actually drop an engine or pick an engine up and actually change it in the water.
Just moving on to the next one here, Kermit. Can you tell us a little bit about the minimum safe crew for operating an airplane like this? You obviously are going to need more than just a pilot and a co-pilot if someone has to be wrangling buoys and so on.
Well, legally, you only need 3 people to operate the airplane, but operationally, you really need 4. So you've got a pilot and a co-pilot. You also have a flight engineer on this airplane, monitors the fuel transfer, engine temps, and all that kind of stuff. He's got a panel back there. He sits facing aft. So that's the required crew, and somebody has to have a flight engineer license to operate the airplane in the back. But then you also have to have a bowsman. It's nice to have somebody that can run around the airplane and look in case there's a leak or some kind of problem, or to go back and get some food for somebody. That's the bowsman on ours, picking up the buoy. And of course, right now I've got the inboards engines shut down. The outboards are running, but they're at idle. But I'm also shutting the mags on and off to slow the airplane down as much as possible.
Kermit, I think there's a question that's likely to come up in the Q&A, so we can probably preempt it now. How do you do a run-up in an airplane with no brakes that's just going to kind of run away with itself while you're doing all of your necessary, pre-takeoff checks?
Yeah, well, obviously, what we're going to want to do is take off into the wind. Okay, if you've got unlimited space, it's not a problem. But so what we would do here is that once the engines are warmed up to a certain degree, and like I said, you remember we're starting the outboard engines first, and in a closed environment like my little lake, you always start the engine closest to the shore. Because once that engine starts, you're moving forward and you're turning away from shore. Okay. So if you can't get the other engine started, then you got to shut the other one down and then figure out what you're going to do. And usually on the lake, when we're operating, we'll have somebody in a boat or something like that. So in a little lake, what we'll do is we'll warm the engines up. Of course, the outboard engines are the first ones to start, so they're the first ones that we're going to run up. So what we'll do is we'll go to the downwind end of the lake, and then we'll basically turn into the wind because I only have 6,000 feet. We'll run the outboard engines up at the same time and do the mag checks and anything else we need to do on the outboard engines. Okay, now we burnt up some of the lake. Okay, so then we turn around. Now we're going downwind. We run up the inboard engines 2 and 3. Okay, and then if everything checks out, then what we do is everything's run up. We're all ready to go. And the next time we turn into the wind, as close to the shoreline, because I've only got 6,000 feet, off we go. And I'm usually, what I did learn to do was I would start with the outboard engines first. When I first went over there, the British pilot was running them all up at the same time. But you get a little bit of water splash initially off the hull, and it was hitting the propellers and stuff on the inboards. So what I would do is I would advance the outboard engines first, get them going. When it got up to a certain little point, it started rising up out of the water, I would come in with the inboard engines, and it would keep from getting the propellers, kind of dings up the leading edges with the water hitting it.
Just before we move on to Q&A here, one last interesting image, which shows basically the process of grabbing that buoy and having the bowsman up in the nose of the airplane as well back during the war. So the more things change, the more they stay the same, I suppose, with some of these older aircraft. As we get started on the Q&A portion of tonight, one thing I think that is on everyone's mind, Kermit, is where does it rank on your sort of list of priorities to fly this airplane again?
Oh my gosh. Well, I tell you what, it isn't on my list to get anything going until I can get a successful business. And, this is going to be down the road because I'm not going to try and operate it anytime before I can't put it down at the seaplane base. Like I said, if you're going to operate it, you have to operate it. You don't just, hey, let's get it flying and we'll fly it for a week and then we'll take it out. If you're going to operate it, you really need to have a plan to be a major focus. Okay, so it's going to be a while. I could see this thing not flying for 6-7 years. We'll see, 10 years. By that time, I'm going to be pretty damn old.
When was the last time you flew it, Kermit?
Well, last time was the '96 Olympic Games, and when I came back from Miami, from Dinner Key original Pan Am Clipper base, landed in the water, pulled it out. It's been sitting out ever since.
And Kermit, I know you mentioned this earlier. What is its total converted capacity to carry passengers?
36, I think. And when I was up there at Oshkosh, every time I flew out and during the air show, would give rides to people. I remember having a big group of the WASP, the Women's Air Force Service pilots, on board. And it was a pretty cool deal to share with people. I had one time, I got Tom POBEREZNY, who was the president of the EAA at the time, and got him in the right seat. He got to fly, when we were doing flybys in the air show. And it was interesting. The first time I saw the Howard Hughes airplane was at Oshkosh. And, I remembered back it was either 1994 or 1995. I remember seeing that airplane, and I got a chance to go through it. I made a mental note, and I thought, oh my God, one day I would love to end up with that airplane. Lo and behold, it's in Florida.
Kermit, do you have a sense of the sort of maximum sea state from the manual of what kinds of waves a Sunderland can reasonably handle on landing?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, I never had the opportunity to do it, but I mean, you could, you know, I think this thing would probably take 2 or 3 feet and it'd be, kind of bumpy or whatever. But what happens is if you're out in open ocean, it's not a function of dealing with waves, it's dealing with swells. Okay. And so, regardless of what the wind direction is, you always land in line with the swells. You could see that it would not be very good landing into the swells perpendicular to them. So regardless, even if you've got to make a crosswind landing, you want to land to where you're going on the long, in line with the swell. And the airplane might rock back and forth as the swell, as you go in and out of the different swells. But, and you would have to use the same technique, for taking off if for some reason you found yourself taking off in really high seas. So I don't think the waves and the chop and that stuff is the issue. It's swells. It's ocean swells.
Got another question here. Kermit, are there any flying boats out there that you would like to have the opportunity to fly, or amphibious airplanes that you haven't yet had the opportunity?
Oh man, I tell you, if other than the Mars, I've flown that. I can't really think of. I mean, I've flown a PBY, I've flown an Albatross, flown the Ducks, and I mean, I think I own them all. Other than the Mars, I own them all, Keegan.
That's a heck of a way to respond to that question. We've got a question here from one of our museum volunteers. Kermit, when will you get your Mosquito flying again so we can do some formation stuff with our Mosquito?
Do some formation stuff. The airplane is at Oshkosh, and I took it there. The last time it flew was during the show in 1989, and the intent was to bring it back, because there were some air shows that I had scheduled, some military air shows after Oshkosh. So I flew home on the airlines, and it was about that time the Kuwaiti War broke out or something, and all of a sudden all the air shows got canceled. It sat up there for a year. Something else came up. Blah blah blah. Hurricane Andrew hit in 1992. Okay, and we were distracted. So the airplane needs a lot of work. Ultimately, that airplane is going to be disassembled and brought back down here and completely gone through. You got to realize that's all original wood. Every other Mosquito on the planet is brand new. I'm not saying they're home built, but ours is a completely original airplane. So that's it's going to be a complete. With as many it's going to be a complete restoration. We will de-skin at least the top of the wing and the top of the horizontal stabilizer. I think the fuselage is probably still good and stuff, but you really got to take a look at it. I mean, how long ago was the war? 70 years? I mean, it's that the glue and the stuff is that old. And so, I've kind of been there, done that. And for a long time, I was the only person flying a Mosquito, last person on the planet. And so anyway, we'll see. There's other ones flying, and I think they're awesome. The people that worked on the ones, I've seen Jerry's, that is a piece of art. It is phenomenal what they recreated. I know Paul Allen's got one. Rod Lewis has got one going, and they're phenomenal. They're gorgeous. It's a great airplane. I'm glad other people got them going. I appreciate people, all my aviation enthusiasts out there would love to tell me how to spend my money, but I'm going to figure it out myself. And some of these things, I've kind of been there, done that. And once somebody else has got something flying, I'm kind of on to other things, so we'll see.
Another great answer. Of all of the airplanes in your collection, Kermit, which is your most favorite?
Well, what you're asking me is, what's my favorite child? They're all my children. So what's your favorite kid? Now, if you change the question and said, if you could only keep one airplane, what would it be? At this point, even though I haven't flown it, I'd probably say the Howard Hughes S-43, because of the historic value, the uniqueness of it, But I got to tell you, if somebody said, you could only keep one for fun, and you didn't need a crew, and you could stick it in a small hangar and you could push it in and out yourself. I got to tell you, man, that's the Sikorsky S-39, that my little giraffe airplane. That is my go-to fun airplane. I land in the water, I go places, I fly around, I buzz everybody, I can get in and out of the hangar myself. You know, I love that airplane. Right now, that's a very, very good favorite. But if I could only keep one in the long run, and it didn't matter size and operating crew, you know, the Howard Hughes airplane's got to be right at the top of the list.
Excellent. Well, folks, this is going to conclude our Q&A session for this evening. Kermit, thank you so much for spending your evening with us and sharing these incredible, well, I guess they're sea stories of an incredibly historic flying boat. And I know we're all eager to come visit once we have an opportunity to do so and the coronavirus has abated. We'd similarly all love to host you up here at the museum anytime you'd like to pop by, and we'll see what we can do to get the lake extended so that you know, you can bring a flying boat up to visit.
Good, good, good. Well, I appreciate it. I appreciate all you guys are doing. And when am I supposed to get my check for this from Jerry? I'm just saying. Tell Jerry and everybody I said hi. Thanks, Keegan.
I will do that. Thank you so much, Kermit. Have a pleasant evening.